Hello, I'm Brian Lee. This is My Life, My Story.
He might be nudging 87 years young, but not even a near-death experience a few years back appears to be slowing down prolific blogger, creative artist and graphic designer Brian Lee. The then newly married Pom emigrated to Australia via New Zealand in 1959 with his bride and now lifelong partner Jackie. Brian shares his life, his story and some family photos in this podcast with pictures.
We're talking with Brian Lee, who's a regular blogger on My Life, My Story. But in fact, this little podcast, we're going to talk about your life, your story. Brian Lee, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, you've done some great writing over the years and over the last 6 or 7 months with My Life, My Story. So thank you for all your contributions. And we've got plenty more to put up. But one of the most interesting ones that I found was My Life, My Story so far in 24 photos. So I thought we might just go through a few of those. You were born in 1935. Tell me about that. Who was your mum? What was your family? Where were you living?
Well, my mother, she was a bit of a country girl from a place called Frampton Cotterell, which is just outside of Bristol. Her parents and that belonged there originally. My father, he worked in a gents outfitter's shop in Bristol. Neither of them sounds like I'm being derogatory, but I'm not. But they weren't the sort to go out and accomplish anything. They were very, not exactly introverted, but they didn't want a lot to do with the world, really. They were happy in their own company. I was the one that branched off and shot off around the world and that sort of thing. I think it frightened them a bit when I first went to New Zealand.
I was going to say you're the one with the personality there, along with your wife, Jackie, who we'll talk about shortly. Now, next photo that we're looking at here is in 1938, and you look like a tough little bugger there. You're on holidays in Devon, near the beach there. What was it like growing up? We're in Bristol, basically, where you were, but you were going on holidays as well. Tell us a little bit about your life growing up.
Well, of course, it was a very different world in those days. It was before the war. You've got to remember also, I was very young at that age. Well, I was only 3 or 4. But what I can remember of it, it was a much simpler, happier way of living than it is nowadays. Where we were on holiday, this is typical really, but my parents went there, Goodrington, every year. Every year they had 2 weeks at Goodrington. They never went anywhere else. That explains the sort of people they were. But I obviously went with them at that young age. I enjoyed it there. It's a nice place, Torquay, Brixham, lovely countryside, Dartmoor just up at the back there. So no complaints, but I'm afraid by the time I got to be a teenager, I was looking for something a bit more exciting than Torbay. And that was when I went off with friends to the Channel Islands and all sorts of places.
It's quite typical, isn't it, of people who just like to go to the same place year after year after year. But yes, I'm with you. We like to go to different places and try different things. Now, we're scrolling through a few more photos, and in 1939, we've got this lovely photo of you on the old car. The family car. I mean, the cars in those days, my goodness, it's like out of the past, a blast from the past.
Yeah. It actually is a slightly peculiar story. Where we lived in Bristol, my father's sister and her husband were for a while their house was being built, lived with us. Now that car was actually my uncle's car, the one who lived with us. So it was treated as the family car while they lived there. But of course, once their house was built and they moved away, the car went with them. My father never learned to drive. In all his life, he never did learn to drive.
Who drove the car?
Once I was old enough, me, he did all the driving.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, we're going to move on to 1942 now. They were some pretty interesting years, but you're still a young kid there. You're about age 7 and in school uniform, but I can also already see the cheekiness kind of coming out in you there. How did that start?
Stop trying to creep around me. Yeah, well, of course, those were very stringent times, although kids like me wouldn't have noticed it so much because my mother and that did all the horrible buying of 2 ounces of meat and 3 ounces of butter, that sort of thing. To us kids, the war was not exactly fun, but it was more interesting than fearsome. We were in a part of Bristol that wasn't heavily bombed, so we didn't have that horror of everybody around us being killed or their homes destroyed. But we used to go out in the morning after a raid searching for shrapnel. You could hear it coming down in the area shot. You hear it twittering as it came down and crashed at the ground. And all we kids had a collection of shrapnel that was a mark of honor almost, especially if you get a nose cone, because nose cones all stayed whole, they didn't break up.
And it might seem a very random question, but do you still have any of those pieces of shrapnel?
No. I'm afraid. They were heavy, to carry a box with shrapnel. You had jagged pieces of solid iron, really, because I don't know if you know, they were the shells that were fired up. It wasn't German stuff falling down.
Yep.
Shells went up.
And then exploded.
They didn't try to hit the plane at all. They exploded the shell, and all these shattered bits of metal were supposed to, some of them, hit.
Pretty amazing times. And when we look back at, I guess, the war years, and kids today particularly have no idea how lucky they are. That, this lockdown thing with COVID just seems to be affecting so many people, but they don't realise how lucky we are ultimately. So we won't go into great detail there, but you get the point.
Yeah, I'm afraid old people, we tend to look on some of the youngsters today as rather sissies, to be perfectly honest. If they had to put up with today, they wouldn't know what hit them. They really didn't.
That's right.
It was so stringent, and there were no street lights, there were no places to go at night. Everything was closed down. It was I don't know about horrifying, but it was not a most pleasant world to live in at that time.
Yeah, well, let's hope that we don't have any further stuff like that, given everything that's going on in the world today. Now, listen, moving forward to 1948 here, and photos I've seen of you that you post on Facebook and whatever. You're already very classy. So you've got a very classy jacket there, and you're in a friend's garden.
Yes, you see, I had a slight advantage there. And my father being in gents outfitting, I'd go into a shop nearly every week and find something I wanted to buy. So I was a bit of a stick dresser in those days. I used to wear these spivvy ties, yellow knot and red and white stripes down the tie and things like that. But also I learnt colour coordination from him. So you wear clothes. You wouldn't wear, brown, they do nowadays, but you wouldn't wear brown shoes with grey trousers.
Well, some people do.
But I think partly it was a throwback from the end of the war as well, the fact we could get more decent clothes and that again. When the war was on, we could get utility, as it was called, clothing. It was manufactured, mass-produced in factories that didn't make their own lines at all. They made these utility garments. But by 1948, the old clothing companies were coming out. Look at the new look for the ladies. Some beautiful fashions came out after the war. Whereas nowadays, I think they're pretty ghastly, some of the fashions we see now.
Yeah,
but women looked so feminine in those days.
Exactly. Let's move on to 1949, and in the Cubs. What did you learn from being in the Cubs?
Well, I think one of the main things I learned was the fact that it taught you how to work as a team. The Cubs was the first story of discipline. I mean, it originated from the services, after all. Baden-Powell, who created it, he was a soldier himself. And it taught you to work with other people, new skills as well, tying knots for one thing. So that's what it was. It was the first and nearest thing to adult discipline, I suppose. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy Scouts, funnily enough. I enjoyed the Cubs, moved up into the Scouts, and got bored with it. Yeah,
I ended up in the Sea Scouts, which was good, gave me my love for sailing and offshore sailing, and done a bit of that over the years. So, the Scouts was good. Alrighty, moving right along. 1951, 1952. You're on holidays. You're at Goodrington in Devon in a sports jacket. you just look a little bit kind of groovy for that time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we were. A whole gang of us thought we were God's gift to fashion and women. That, it was a lovely period. You're still innocent, although you don't realise it. You're still terribly innocent.
Yeah.
And things like that, putting on a flash shirt or swaggering as you walk, you thought that was putting you to the centre of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas now I know that I don't think there's anything behind me as far as the universe is concerned. I'm on the edge already. You get smaller as you get older, don't you? You suddenly realise just how tiny we all are.
Yeah.
But at that age, everything is subsidiary to me. Or
the world revolves around you at that age,
exactly.
or me, or whoever. Now, I've got a lovely photo here, a very sophisticated one. The first year of national service, and you were a radar operator.
Yes. Yeah, well, we all had to do it in those days. 2 years for king and country, or queen and country. She took over just as I joined up, 53. But it was a good 2 years. I was never fitter before or since.
Yes.
Square bashing really made a man of me. Route marches and gymnastics.
Yeah.
All that sort of. I was superbly fit. It was in the summer, so we were out and about all the time. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was, I felt good.
Yeah.
And the radar was a challenge along my sensibilities. I wouldn't want to be a gun carrier particularly. I wouldn't like the idea of shooting people. I'd love to have been able to be a pilot if I could. But of course, I didn't have to. You needed almost a university degree in those days to be chosen for pilotship. Yeah, it was good. Used to do a bit of instructing other people how to operate the various pieces of equipment and that in a couple of years. And also I had my own studio there. The fact that I was a graphic designer, they latched onto that. And anything for the camp that was requiring graphics, number one had to do it.
You had to do it, fair enough.
Made it all very interesting. It added a lot more variety than a lot of servicemen got.
Yeah. Now, the love of your life, 1959, that's a pretty special year.
Yeah, I hadn't known her long. I'd only known her for about 6 or 7 months. I knew her mother and father much more. I'd been drinking companions of theirs for about 2 years. We used to meet them nearly every Friday up the pub. And then one time they brought Jackie along. She was training to be a nurse in those days. Her dad used to go and pick her up from the hospital and bring her to the pub with us. And that's how our relationship started. I always say they trapped me into it because one evening we were in the pub and Elsie, that's Jackie's mum, said, "Look, Bert and I are going off to a party. Do you think you could take Jackie home for us?" And that was real, all right, I don't mind. But that was the start of the relationship, really. It didn't take long after that. What happened, again, this ties in again with my graphics, really, to a certain extent. But we got engaged a couple of months after we'd been going out together. I said, "Come on, let's get married." So Jackie said, "Fine." I went and saw her parents and said, "Is that okay with you if we get engaged?" And they were all for it. Of course, they knew me well. But about 3 days, literally, about 3 days after that, the boss of the company I worked for, ES&A Robinson, he's a big, Lord God Almighty, it was a big firm. I was called to his office and they asked me if I would go out to New Zealand to start a studio out there. They bought a new factory in Auckland and they wanted somebody to teach the people over there the methods used by Robinsons to produce their packaging. It was a packaging. Paper bags, boxes, cartons. And so I had to go around that 3 days after getting engaged to say to Jackie, "Hey, I'm going to New Zealand. Are you going to come?" And she said, "Oh, yes, please." And then, of course, we had to convince our parents. I mean, my mum and dad, I just said, "Look, Mum and Dad, I'm going." But I think Jackie might have had a bit of a harder time first. But,
yeah, especially back in those days, it was, the unknown in many ways, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't have, what we're doing now, this instant, there was nothing like this.
That's right. That's right.
We used to send a letter every week, which would take about a week and a half to get there. We'd phone them at Christmas to say Merry Christmas and that, and you had to book that up about 6 months beforehand. And then when you got on the phone, it was the most ludicrous call. Hello, how are you? What's the weather like your end? Our weather is pretty dreadful. Nothing natural or normal said at all. And it was like talking down a long tunnel, echo. It was most unsatisfactory. But that was the only contact we had in those days.
Any way you could do it.
We phone our daughter every week and sit just like I'm talking to you now, sit chatting with her for an hour or more.
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. Now, speaking of kids, we've got a lovely photo here, 1963, of you with Kerry and Vincent, and you're talking about Ross didn't arrive till you returned from England. But tell us about the kids. We got 3 of them there. Are they a handful?
Our daughter was the first, Kerry. She eventually met a fireman in England after we'd emigrated, who went on to become second in command of the whole of Devon and Cornwall before he retired. So they are packed up now, young still, just on their 60s, with a nice pension, which grows with him, because on high rank like his, he got a good pension, obviously. Yep. I don't know what it was, but I know he got a good pension. So, success story. The next one was Vince. Now, not our failure, but every family seems to have one, a bother boy, always getting into trouble. At one stage, I think it was $56,000 in parking fines.
What?
That'll give you give you some idea. Anyway, he seems to have come through the other side now. He was mixing with a lot of unpleasant people we weren't keen on at all. He'd buy bloody expensive cars that he couldn't really afford. Several times I'd have to stand guarantor for him so he could get a loan to get a car. And I stopped that. Won't do it anymore. But anyway, he's now working for Uncle Bob's, it's called. They're a charity in Melbourne that raise money for the Children's Hospital. They've been doing it for years. And I think he's a bit more stable now.
That's good.
He's laying off the drink, and he's never had drugs, luckily. But he was our problem child. Now, Ross, the last one that was born, you don't see him in that photograph. He was still on the way then. But he became a stonemason in Bristol.
Okay.
And did very well. Not to be confused, I hasten to add, with a monumental mason. He doesn't carve names on gravestones. He does real stonemasonry. Right. And, or he did. But again, he's made a real success of his life. He retired about a year ago at 60. Made enough money. He's just bought a lovely house in Mornington Peninsula. A great success, quiet lad, 2 daughters, a grandson on the way, due any day now, actually. So, yeah, but all in all, we're very satisfied with our kids. They all had 10 fingers and 10 toes. They all have a reasonably functioning brain. They've been no trouble, touch wood, apart from Vince, but he wasn't really trouble to us. He was more trouble to himself.
Yeah,
to us.
That happens.
No worst enemy in some ways.
Yeah.
They've all got different personalities.
Of course.
You can't build a personality for them. They have to build their own personality.
Yep.
Yep.
We did a story you did a story for us, thank you, about gliding and what it's like to be flying.
Oh, yes.
What got you into gliding?
Well, I've always loved flying for a start. Ever an air show around Bristol, I would go there with a few dollars pounds in those days in my pocket. If there was any joy flights going, I'd be up there 10 minutes back down on Earth. I just loved it to be up in planes. It was purely by chance, really. After we came back to England, when we'd been in New Zealand for 5 years, we bought a house in a little village called Westwood near Bradford-on-Avon. And I was out in the garden doing a bit of gardening one afternoon. I don't know what made me do it. Something made me look up. And up above me was a glider swanning about. And that got me thinking straight away. I thought, does that mean there's an airfield somewhere near here? And so I inquired, found there was one, went down there the next weekend. Next thing I knew, I was up flying a glider. It was lovely. Once I got soloed and I was flying by myself, it was lovely. You're in this plane all on your own. Your whole life is your responsibility. There's nobody else in the world can help you. You bail out or you die. it was just the sort that my favourite hobby, really, in those days. They'd been fishing up until then, but gliding too.
Now, look, moving forward a little bit, your time in Australia, you've obviously enjoyed it. So you've gone to New Zealand, you've gone back to the UK, and then come back out to Australia. And I've got a lovely photo of you here in about 2004, the Melbourne Cup. You've obviously become a bit of an Aussie, even though you still got the accent.
To a certain extent, and you can blame our two sons for that. They came out a couple of years before us. They knew all about the Melbourne Cup. I don't think it's as good now as it used to be, but the car park, you may know, I expect you know about it, but the car park at the Melbourne Cup is where it all happens. Everybody dresses up. There's people bring mobile spas on the back of their utes, and everybody gets drunk. It's a real hell of a party. In fact, quite a lot of people don't go into the race at all.
Yeah,
they don't
I've
do
heard
the race.
that.
They spend the whole day out in the car park.
Well, the photo we've got of you with the bottle of champagne looks like you did the same thing.
In the car park, yeah. And the funny thing, that happened about 4 days after we arrived in Australia.
Yeah.
We got out there at the end of October, and the race was at the beginning of November. And I bought a car the day after we arrived, a Falcon, and on Cup Day, I drove the car with our sons in the car with me and Jackie, and had a few champagnes, which was very nice. And I thought, I better be careful. I'll stop drinking by about 9:30, 10 o'clock, which I did. But we came out, drove out, and there was a group of policemen checked me. He said, "You're right on the limit, sir, 05." And I thought, oh shit, oh pardon me, I shouldn't do that. I thought, oh, cut. But I thought, here I go. I just arrived in Australia, just bought an expensive car and get banned. And I more or less said that to him. And he was quite good. He said, look, you're right on the limit. I'll let you go this time. Drive straight home and don't get into trouble again. So I got away with it. But it's a very strong memory I have of that very first Melbourne Cup too, because it nearly wiped me out before I started. Imagine trying to find a job in Australia.
Well, you see, exactly. Well, you were obviously very nice, and I think that's the secret to getting out of pretty well anything. Is just be nice. It's a little bit like being married for 63 odd years or something. You obviously haven't survived that long for being nasty, so you be nice, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
Just in a nutshell, tell us how life has changed with you and Jackie over those 60 odd years there.
Well, again, we were obviously, though we didn't know, we were very innocent when we got married. We went on our honeymoon in Devon just before we left for New Zealand. Stayed in a motel and we had half a bottle of champagne. Wow. That was the living end as far as we were concerned. I drink more than that with sitting watching the telly in the evening sometimes now. We were that sort of innocent, when we got to New Zealand. It was the same. Now, I think we're fairly world-wise. We're not the sorts that are going night-clubbing and all that sort of thing, because it doesn't interest us. We'd much rather go to a nice restaurant and have a good meal together than do that. But I think we both have a good sense of humour. I'm pretty certain of that. We can laugh at troubles. We agree on those things. We have our ups and downs. If you don't have a fight occasionally, you've got nothing to live for, have you? Yep. It's the making up afterwards, which is the good fun. And Jackie has always wanted to go along with, they'd be mainly my plans really about wanting to go to New Zealand and that sort. She's dropped in beautifully. She's been as eager as me to do it. So I've got no complaints. I wouldn't want anybody better than Jackie. I think she'll see me out till the end now. I can't see it being worthwhile getting a divorce at my age.
Exactly.
So I had a burst appendix, as you remember, a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I was really close to death then. The surgeon said he thought he'd lost me, but I got over it. And she helped nurse me back to health again. With her bit of nursing experience anyway.
Good. That's good.
She doesn't panic in a situation like that, like some girls would.
Yeah. No, I think it's good if you've got a partner who supports you and you support them. That's really good. I mean, Kay's always thanked me that we've got this life on the road. If people don't know, we're currently a couple of years and a bit more into living in a caravan. People say, "Wow, living in a caravan!" No thanks. It's like, well, it's the best thing ever. Kind of every other day, she says, "Thank you for forcing me to come. And the same, when we went and lived in Spain, I was working over there. Thank you for, forcing me to go to Spain.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's good. And and she forces me to do a few things too. So that's another story.
Well, it's funny, you're talking about going, as you are now, in caravan touring around. That's exactly what Jackie and I were doing. I had a dreadful boss. I didn't start my own company over here. It's not too old for that. And he was a bastard, pardon the expression, rotten man. Changed the rules day by day to suit his desires. Distrustful, swearing. I put up with it. I was about 63 at the time, I think it was. And I was trying to put up with it until I retired. I thought, if I can hang on, at least I can retire. But in the end, I said to Jackie, I was getting ill. I was being sick before I went to work in the mornings. Sure, it was ruining my love of artwork. I'd been loved my job all my life. And in the end, I said, I can't stand this anymore. So we bought a caravan, sold our house, and we were going to go off, like you, up north. We were going to go grey nomading around the north of the country and see what happened. And we got 200 kilometres down the road to Yarram.
Yeah.
And we've been here ever since.
Yeah.
We got sucked in, they're friendly people. We thought we'd stop, because we're in no hurry at that stage. We thought, we might as well stop here for a week or two before we move on. And next thing we know, can you do this? Can you do that? Would you like to join Lions? And, we were suddenly a member of the community. And we've been here ever since.
Now, one final thing, the secret to a happy life. You and Jackie seem so happy, not only together, but just generally with life. What do you think is the secret to a happy life?
Basically, it's having the spirit of give and take. But we've never criticized anybody else for anything they want to do. And we don't let them criticize us. And we don't get in each other's pockets too much. We've got lovely friends here. Got more friends in Yarram than we've ever had. But they're friends. Yeah, they're, well, I have to put up with you. At least you're not in Yarram.
We've never met. I should point out to everybody, we've never actually met. Spoken on the phone a couple of times, multiple texts and emails, but that's another story.
Yeah. I didn't realise you were so ugly, actually. So,
oh, right. Thank you very much. Yes.
I thought I'd better say it before you said it.
Brian Lee, thank you very much for joining us on My Life, My Story. In fact, it was your life, your story that we're trying to tell. And we hope that this is a great memory, not only for you and Jackie to just go back on a few things, but also for your family and people who are following us online.
No, it's been lovely doing it. I've enjoyed it, having a chat with you like this.
Good.
You've got my life story in your pocket now, so I'm trying to think if there's anything that you can blackmail me on.